If you have ever struggled with deep, unyielding sadness or crippling anxiety, you have likely been handed a very specific, very simplified story. You have been told that your brain is simply misfiring. You have been told that you have a chemical imbalance, specifically, a lack of serotonin, and that your genetics simply dealt you a bad hand. You have been made to feel like you are fundamentally broken, and that the only solution is to chemically force your brain to be happy. Welcome to Dr. Levitas. But what if your deep exhaustion, your lack of motivation, and your heavy mood are not a psychological failure, but a brilliant, ancient biological survival mechanism? What if your brain doesn't lack serotonin, but instead, it literally thinks you have the flu? Today, we are exploring a medical paradigm shift that is completely rewriting our understanding of mental health. We are moving away from the stigma of mental weakness and stepping into the hard science of immunology. Today, we are talking about neuroinflammation, or the brain on fire. Please take a second to like the video and leave a comment. Your engagement is a big help to the channel. For over 3 decades, the entire psychiatric and pharmaceutical industry was built on the foundation of the serotonin hypothesis. The idea was simple: depression is caused by low serotonin, so if we give you an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, we boost the serotonin, and you feel better. But the scientific community has recently experienced a massive earthquake. In 2022, a monumental umbrella review published in the journal Molecular Psychiatry looked at decades of research, involving hundreds of thousands of patients. Their conclusion was staggering: there is no consistent evidence that depression is caused by lower serotonin levels or abnormal serotonin activity. This completely disrupted the status quo. If depression isn't just a simple lack of a happy chemical, what is it? Modern neuroscientists and immunologists are now pointing to a much more complex, whole-body systemic issue. They are discovering that for millions of people, clinical depression is actually an allergic, inflammatory reaction. To understand this, we have to look at a biological phenomenon. I want you to think back to the last time you had a severe case of the flu, or a really bad physical infection. How did you feel? You didn't just have a cough or a fever. You probably wanted to isolate yourself in a dark room. You lost your appetite. You lost interest in your hobbies. You felt physically heavy, deeply fatigued, and emotionally numb. Biologists call this sickness behavior, and it is completely intentional. When your body detects a severe infection, it forces you to feel miserable so that you will stop moving, stop socializing, and conserve all of your metabolic energy to fight the virus. Now, look at those symptoms again: isolation, loss of appetite, loss of joy, severe fatigue, and emotional numbness. That is the exact clinical diagnostic criteria for major depressive disorder. The symptoms are biologically identical. The only difference is that with the flu, the infection clears up in a week, and your mood bounces back. But with chronic neuroinflammation, the alarm bell gets stuck in the on position. Your brain is trapped in a perpetual state of sickness behavior, convinced that you are constantly fighting off a deadly pathogen. So, what is tripping this alarm? If you don't have a virus, what is telling your brain that you are sick? The answer lies inside your digestive tract, and it involves microscopic messenger molecules called cytokines. Your gut is lined with a mucosal barrier that is only one single cell thick. Its job is to absorb nutrients while keeping toxins, undigested food particles, and harmful bacteria safely inside the digestive tube. But our modern lifestyle, filled with ultra-processed foods, industrial seed oils, chronic stress, and agricultural pesticides, damages this delicate lining. The tight junctions between the cells break apart, creating a condition known as increased intestinal permeability, or leaky gut. When your gut is leaky, inflammatory particles literally spill out of your digestive tract and into your bloodstream. Your immune system sees these particles floating in your blood, assumes you are under biological attack, and immediately launches an aggressive immune response. To coordinate this attack, your white blood cells release inflammatory messenger proteins called cytokines. These cytokines travel through your bloodstream and eventually reach your brain. For a long time, doctors believed the brain was completely protected from bodily inflammation by something called the blood-brain barrier. We now know that inflammatory cytokines can actively cross this barrier. When they enter the brain tissue, they trigger specialized brain immune cells called microglia. The microglia panic. They shift from a state of cellular repair into a state of aggressive chemical warfare, bathing your neural pathways in a fiery, inflammatory soup. This localized brain inflammation forcefully shuts down the production of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, dragging you directly into sickness behavior. But the inflammatory chemicals in your blood are only half of the story. Your gut also has a direct, high-speed fiber optic cable that plugs straight into your brainstem. It is called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in the body, wandering from your brain, through your chest, and wrapping entirely around your digestive organs. Think of the vagus nerve as a massive biological microphone listening to the chatter of the trillions of bacteria living inside your microbiome. If your microbiome is healthy and diverse, the bacteria produce soothing, anti-inflammatory compounds called short-chain fatty acids. The vagus nerve hears this peaceful chatter and sends a signal up to your brain that says, "We are safe. We are nourished. You can feel calm and happy." But if your microbiome is overrun by pathogenic, inflammatory bacteria, often caused by a diet high in refined sugars and stripped of fiber, those bad bacteria produce toxic byproducts called lipopolysaccharides. The vagus nerve detects these toxins. It immediately treats it as a biological emergency, sending rapid-fire panic signals straight up the nerve and into the anxiety centers of your brain. You can do all the talk therapy in the world, but if your gut bacteria are sending an SOS signal up your vagus nerve 24 hours a day, your brain will physically not allow you to feel at peace. This is why we must completely reframe how we treat mood disorders. We cannot just medicate the symptom, we must put out the fire. And the most powerful fire extinguisher you have is on the end of your fork. The scientific evidence for nutritional psychiatry is becoming undeniable. In 2017, a landmark clinical trial known as the SMILES trial was published. It was one of the first randomized controlled trials to test dietary intervention as a treatment for clinical depression. The researchers took a group of patients suffering from moderate to severe depression, many of whom were unresponsive to standard medication. They put them on a modified Mediterranean diet, focusing heavily on whole foods, removing ultra-processed junk, cutting out industrial seed oils, and dramatically lowering refined carbohydrates and gluten. The results were a paradigm shift. Over 30% of the patients in the dietary intervention group achieved full clinical remission of their depression, compared to only 8% in the social support control group. Let that sink in. By simply removing the foods that cause leaky gut and feeding the microbiome the fiber and omega-3 fatty acids it needs to lower systemic inflammation, they effectively cured treatment-resistant depression in a third of the patients. They didn't alter the brain's chemistry directly, they cooled off the immune system, and the brain naturally healed itself. Alongside nutrition, we also have mechanical ways to aggressively cool neuroinflammation and force the brain out of sickness behavior. This brings us to the profound, science-backed power of the cold plunge. Immersing your body in freezing water might sound like a trendy social media challenge, but it is actually a profound neurological intervention. When you drop your body into cold water, you trigger a massive, immediate systemic shock. Your brain responds by releasing a colossal flood of a neurotransmitter called norepinephrine, often increasing it by up to 500% within minutes. Norepinephrine is incredible because it is a potent anti-inflammatory agent in the brain. It actively suppresses those angry, inflammatory cytokines we talked about earlier. Furthermore, the sheer shock of the cold forces your body to heavily activate the vagus nerve to try and calm your heart rate down. This deep, forced vagus nerve stimulation acts like a system reboot for your central nervous system. It jolts you out of the heavy, lethargic state of sickness behavior and replaces it with sharp, crystal clear, alert energy. It is a biological reset button for an inflamed mind. Finally, to sustain this healthy, uninflamed brain, we must repopulate the gut with the exact bacteria that produce peace and resilience. Enter the era of psychobiotics. Psychobiotics are specific, clinically studied strains of probiotics that have been proven to yield direct, measurable mental health benefits. We are not just talking about generic yogurt here. We are looking at precise bacterial strains. For example, extensive clinical literature has highlighted the power of Lactobacillus helveticus and Bifidobacterium longum. In human, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, these specific psychobiotic strains have been shown to significantly lower the stress hormone cortisol, reduce systemic inflammation, and notably improve scores of anxiety and depression in human subjects. These bacteria literally manufacture the precursors to neurotransmitters right inside your gut, while simultaneously repairing the tight junctions of your intestinal wall to stop the inflammatory leak. By strategically supplementing with psychobiotics, you're planting an anti-inflammatory garden directly at the source of the fire. The doctor's verdict: extinguish the fire. Your depression is not a moral failing. Your anxiety is not a weakness of your character. They are profound, biological cries for help from a body that is fighting a chronic, invisible, inflammatory war. By understanding that your brain is on fire, you take your power back. By eliminating inflammatory seed oils, healing your leaky gut, utilizing cold exposure, and nourishing your microbiome, you can turn off the sickness behavior. You can extinguish the fire, clear the smoke, and finally give your mind the peaceful, vibrant environment it needs to thrive. Stay resilient, treat your body with profound empathy, and I will see you in the next video. Watch this video suggestion, it was especially picked for you. Also share, comment, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. It helps a ton with the algorithm. Remain tuned for future videos to empower your health and fitness journey. So, stay healthy, stay happy, and keep going.